It's a big year for Lincoln Riley and the USC Trojans, a year in which they joined the Big Ten, and there are some big questions that need to be answered. Will the offense continue to be explosive without Caleb Williams? Can the defense step up and play in a manner that they need them to play? So you look at those questions and wonder what should we expect from this team in 2024. We take a deep dive into this program to see what those expectations should be, as well as how they answer those questions. Before we do that, though, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. It goes a long way in helping this channel. It's been a great run so far. So far, we have seen tremendous growth with the channel because of this deep dive series. And again, that is not possible without all of you. We are well into this series. I'm excited to keep this going towards some of the top teams in college football, including USC. Lincoln Riley has done, I think, a good job in his coaching career of winning football games. Obviously, there have been some bumps in the road, and there have been some questions about his ability to coach certain teams. But I think that he is someone that knows what he's doing. He obviously has a good handle on what to do offensively and knows the kind of player that he needs in his program to make that happen. Obviously, things are going to be a little bit different this year, but we will see what happens with that offense under the new quarterback. Now, the defense obviously was a problem. I think everybody outside of the USC program, maybe even within, knew that Alex Grinch needed to go. It was just a matter of whether or not Lincoln Riley knew that or not. And obviously, it was unfortunate they had to wait until last year to make that happen. But obviously, they move on. And you have to tip your hat to Lincoln Riley. He found one of the best defensive coordinators in college football and found a way to bring him to campus. D'Angelo Lynn is going to take over that defense. And at worst, this is going to be a team that tackles better. Because when you watch the Alex Grinch era, you saw one common theme, and that was the inability to tackle. I think that D'Angelo Lynn brings a new mentality to this team, and that's going to be huge for a program that needs to get better defensively. That's probably the most obvious thing in college football right now is USC's need to be better on that side of the football. They also bring in some very good players from the transfer portal, and they are able to replace certain talent and bring in guys that are going to help, especially on defense. And we'll dive more into those guys in a little bit, but just kind of an overview. Bringing a guy in like Greedy Vance, that was kind of an underrated addition. Getting Jaden Maeda, even if he isn't the starter, which he's probably not going to be right away, that's a good addition as well. Bringing back Kyle Ford, I think that he is someone who has a lot of potential to help this wide receiver group as well. You bring in a couple of UCLA transfers, you bring in a couple of Oregon State transfers, you bring in Kamari Ramsey and John Humphrey from UCLA, you bring in Easton Mascarenas Arnold, and you also bring in Akili Arnold from Oregon State. So you bring in talented players that can help the defensive side of the ball, and you have a pretty much brand new secondary that's going to be really interesting to watch this year. Losing guys like Raleek Brown, I think you're kind of okay with that. He's very talented, very fast, someone who could be a really interesting player in terms of what he can do for Arizona State. But losing him obviously hurts a little bit, but also at the same time, you needed to find new talent. A guy like Dorian Singer obviously didn't work out. He's a former transfer portal player as well. So certain players you lose like that you're kind of disappointed in. Corey Foreman is probably a disappointing loss. Malachi Nelson moving on, not really unexpected, but also still someone that you probably didn't want to have to move on from, but alas, here we are. This is obviously a problem that USC knows that they'll be in when they bring in certain talented players, but they've done a good job of bringing in guys from the transfer portal that can at least help with some of that. And some of them will help on the offensive side of the ball. And we'll dive right into that. Miller Moss is going to be the new guy on campus. He is going to be QB1, and he has the whether it's fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you view it, task of taking over for Caleb Williams. Now, Caleb was obviously a phenomenal talent, very talented, very athletic, and someone who was dynamic on the football field. You knew that you had to account for Caleb Williams. You knew that he was going to be special. You knew that he was going to do his part. It was just a matter of can everybody else step up around him. He is obviously gone. He is with the Chicago Bears, and Miller Moss now takes over. Miller Moss is someone who obviously you look at the bowl game. We can't really take a ton from one bowl game, but at the same time, you have to at least acknowledge that it happened. You saw a guy who's playing with a ton of confidence, and that's what Lincoln Riley needs from him this year. They need him to play with that confidence to be able to move this offense down the field. Because when you look at this team, this is a group that finished fifth in passing, and Miller Moss is not going to be as agile as Caleb Williams. So the rushing attack obviously has to do its part, but Miller Moss is going to have to continue to be a solid passer for this offense in order to move the ball down the field. I think that we saw what his ceiling could be. It's just a matter of how consistently will he hit that. Now, the rushing attack is a different story. They finished 92nd last year, and that's just not going to cut it. And that's with some NFL talent on the roster. So that's going to have to change if you're USC. They bring in Jaquavius Marks from Mississippi State, which isn't exactly a program that's known for running the football. Obviously, they tried that last year and that did not work, but he's definitely an interesting player. I think he fits well into what USC wants to do. A above average pass catcher. I think that he is capable of being a threat with the ball in his hands in space and in passing attack. So that's huge. But I think he's an underrated runner as well. So we'll see what he can do to help that group improve. Quinton Joyner obviously will play a role in that as well. He's part of that rotation. And when you look at what USC has, you might say that depth is a concern for this group just because you don't have a ton of proven players outside of Marks. Joyner obviously has some experience, but at the same time, not a ton of experience where you feel comfortable about what he can do. But that also is a good thing. You leave the door open for some guys to step up and showcase what they can do. Behind Miller Moss, that's where you also have some questions. Is Jaden Maeva ready for that transition? Had a huge year at UNLV and now comes to USC to potentially maybe take over for Miller Moss if he can, but also be the backup and maybe the future of the program. We'll see what he can do. He's a young player that's still learning and has plenty of exciting traits that could help him tremendously in the future. But will that be required early, or are you going to have to wait to see what his talent can do for this offense? And I really like that fit with Lincoln Riley's system and what he can do. That's going to be fun to watch. He is someone who is tremendously talented. Like I said, has that dual threat ability to move the ball with the through the air and with his legs. So someone who's gonna be fun to watch in the future. It's just gonna be Miller Moss's show for now. The guys that they're going to be throwing to are also interesting. Ton of talent here. I don't think you're lacking in talent whatsoever. It's just a matter of one, staying healthy and also being consistent. A guy like Zachariah Branch is going to be the perfect example of that. Now, Zach Branch, when healthy and when playing at a consistent level, is one of the most explosive wide receivers in college football. He is tremendous. When you put him either at wide receiver, you can put him as a returner. Getting him the football is high priority for this USC team. Finding ways to get Zach Branch the football is going to be key, and it's going to be something that this program wants to do on a frequent basis. And it's easy to see why. If you go back and watch his highlights, you can see exactly why he is someone they want to have the football frequently. He's an explosive weapon. They utilize him in multiple different ways in the offense. They also, like I said, get him in the return game. So he is going to be someone that teams have to scheme for because of his talent, because of his explosiveness. You simply cannot afford to just let him do his thing and hope for the best. That's just not a smart strategy. Then you have other guys that need to step up, and you have intriguing options. Kyron Hudson is someone who could play a huge role for this team this year. 189 yards and 2 touchdowns last season. 6'1", 205 pounds. So someone who could play a bigger role. We've had a number of talented players play wide receiver for Lincoln Riley at USC, and now there's kind of a new era being ushered in. Other guys to keep an eye on, Mekhi Lemon has been a player that's stepped up in a big way this past offseason. Jacoby Lane is another player that could play a role as well. So you have a couple of guys that are relatively unknown right now. The USC program obviously knows who they are, but those are two guys that could play huge roles for this passing attack. And again, this passing attack was really good last year, but they need new faces to step up. Jay Fair comes in from Auburn. You also, like I said, get Kyle Ford, and you have options. I think you have good options, but you just have to find ways to get them the football and also find chemistry with Miller Moss or whoever the quarterback is going to be. Finding chemistry with them, finding ways to get open so that they can hit you downfield. There's too much talent in this wide receiver group, in this pass catching group, to not get the football down the field efficiently. The tight end position is also kind of the same way. Deuce Robinson is a massive target, maybe on the leaner side, but in terms of height, he is definitely a long player, a tall player that is really easy to find downfield. 6'6", 215 pounds, great catch radius, also a dangerous weapon when it comes to blocking kicks. So he is someone who could have an impact in different ways than you're not used to. Now, you'd like to see him play more of a role as a pass catcher more than anything. And we saw a little bit of what he could do last year, 351 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is someone who, like I said, probably should play a bigger role in this offense. Same with Lake McCree. I think that you could see maybe more two tight end sets until some wide receivers step up. Again, when you look at what this team has in terms of options for pass catchers, there's explosive talent everywhere. And you have plenty of talented tight ends to utilize as well. So that's going to be interesting to see how Lincoln Riley and the offense utilizes their talent. Because again, there's lots of options. It just comes down to getting them the football and letting them do their thing. The offensive line obviously has been a question for a little bit of time now, and it's going to be under the spotlight once again. Now you usher in a couple of new faces. Alani Noah comes in at the guard position. Elijah Page will also play a more prominent role in 2024. Also behind them, you have lots of new faces. You have three redshirt freshmen and a true freshman that could play bigger roles in the offensive line. That's going to be something to keep an eye on because, again, USC's offensive line has had some talented players, some very experienced players come through, but they have also been at times questioned in terms of their consistency, what their ceiling looks like. So that's something to keep an eye on. Now, Jonah Monheim is back. He is going to be the leader of that group, moves in to center to take over. I think that is a huge addition to the line in terms of sliding him over, a good move, put him in a position that is so prominent and so important because he's going to help Miller Moss get comfortable. He's seen a thing or two. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to get other guys up to speed and get them in position. It's just going to come down to how those new faces step up. Because again, just because Page and Noah are in the starting spots right now doesn't mean they're going to keep them. I'm not saying that they're going to fail, but you also have to be concerned about, can these guys step up? Are they able to play consistently? And is that going to be enough to help this offense? Again, you have plenty of questions, but at the same time, you'll also have some really exciting opportunities. And you have some veterans in place that can step up and show these new faces, these new players, what is expected to play at a high level. Because at times, you're probably not going to have to do a ton of blocking in Lincoln Riley's system. You just have to let your skill positions do most of the work. You just have to do your part for a brief period of time, which is huge. But at the same time, you're going to be asked to block for a while at times too. You're going to face some really talented players in the Big Ten. This is also a new challenge for everyone. You are facing brand new competition. Yes, you have three teams joining you that you're familiar with, but you're also going into a conference that has so many new teams you've never seen before. And that's going to be a challenge. And there's plenty of defensive line talent in the Big Ten that they have not seen. And that could present some unique challenges for this offense. But if you have to feel good about one side of the ball, you have to trust what Lincoln Riley is doing. You have to assume that he knows what is expected. He knows how to get his guys up to speed. So that's a group that I'm less worried about than the defense. That being said, the defense should be interesting. D'Anton Lynn, like I said, comes in and he has a really fun group. There's not a shortage of talent. And we're going to go through this talent and see what should we expect from this group. We start obviously up front with the defensive line, and this is a group that could get after the quarterback in a big way. Now, do they have what D'Anton Lynn had at UCLA last year? I don't think so, but they have plenty of talent. Anthony Lucas and Jamil Muhammad are going to be really fun to watch on the edge. Muhammad was an absolute disruptive force for USC last year, 10 and a half tackles for loss. He is someone who can get to the quarterback, get to the ball carrier, and be disruptive. Anthony Lucas, 6'5", 275 pounds, someone who has a good frame to utilize, and someone who could take a huge step in 2024. Now, if you're able to do that, you're going to utilize your system that you're using in D'Anton Lynn's, and you're going to take over a new look for a defense that, like I said, is a group that needs to get better. And part of that is being disruptive up front. And when you look at the numbers for USC, part of their struggles have to do with the lack of disruption. And if you're not able to slow teams down, it's because you're not getting any penetration, you're not getting in the backfield, and you're not getting to the quarterback. You're giving the quarterback time to throw. And in this conference, you cannot afford to let teams do that. So Lucas and Muhammad play really big roles in in that regard. You also have a freshman in Cameron Fountain. You're going to see what he can do at an early part of his career, but he has a couple of guys that he can learn from to make things interesting. Bear Alexander was the talk of the offseason at this position. With the transfer portal, obviously plays a huge role in the offseason. And Bear Alexander, there was, rumors that he was going to go somewhere. Obviously, that was not true, but it still led to people talking about USC and what he was going to do. He is back after, I think, a solid season. 48 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 6'3", 313 pounds, the former Georgia transfer, didn't waste time getting on the field at USC. And I think that if he can really hone in on his skill set and work with D'Anton and that staff, he is going to be something special. You also bring an interesting transfer in Nate Clifton from Vanderbilt, someone who is not going to be. I mean, I don't think anybody really talked about Nate Clifton going to USC. That wasn't a big conversation point. But to me, that was a solid addition. I think it was a very underrated addition for USC because again, you are trying to raise the level of competition, trying to raise your level of play at USC, and getting the guys up front that are right for the job is probably one of the biggest steps that you can take. And D'Anton, like I said, has good guys to be able to make that happen. Clifton and Alexander are going to be a fun duo to watch on the interior. And then when you have to worry about them, Lucas and Muhammad are going to take over at the edge. That's going to be really fun to watch. That is a group that has tremendous potential. And like I said, when you look at the numbers, it's not a group that was good last year, but this group right here, this defensive line, can make a huge impact on how the rest of the defense plays. If you are disruptive, if you are making life difficult for the offensive line, for the quarterback, that's going to open things up for the guys behind you. Now, the linebacker position feels like it's pretty solid as well. Mason Cobb is back after an 85 tackle season. He also had 7 tackles for loss. Easton Mascarenas Arnold is coming in from Oregon State, a group that was very under the radar with the Beavers. And this is going to be a fun duo to watch. I think that they are going to be that group that is just solid, where you don't really have to worry about them, but they're also asked to do quite a bit. And you're also joining a conference that is going to be extremely physical. You will see more teams like Utah that require you to be physical, which is why I think that the defensive line is so good because you have a guy like Bear Alexander who's going to be physical. You have Nate Clifton, who has, for his whole career with Vanderbilt, has been fighting tooth and nail just to make progress and be disruptive. That is a mentality you want on your defensive line. And that's also going to be a mentality you want from your linebackers. Mason Cobb is someone who has been in the Big 12 and the Pac 12. He has not seen something like the Big 10 level competition in terms of physicality so far, but you've seen a little bit of it. You just haven't seen consistently. Mascarenas Arnold comes in, and he, I think, is one of those guys who comes from, when you come from a smaller program, I think you bring in that chip on your shoulder that you need to prove that you are or worthy of playing at USC. And that's going to be something that helps him tremendously. It's something that will get him through a lot of games and help him be successful. And he's a tackling machine. 107 tackles last year, 6.5 tackles for loss. He and Cobb are really fun to watch. I think that they're going to be really good in space, and they're very athletic, know how to get to the ball carrier. It's going to be a different challenge this year than we've seen. Now, when you look at Rajon Davis, is going to be a part of that rotation. Also, a guy who, Eric Gentry is a very interesting player because he has the length and the athleticism to compete at a high level. But can he, again, it's going to come down to, can you handle physicality and can you stay healthy? Eric Gentry has so much potential and a lot of things to like about his game. And it'll be fun to watch him play and learn how to handle life in the Big Ten and be a part of this rotation that should be, like I said, really fun to watch. This is a linebacker group that has lots of potential and has the ability to make some big plays. And that's going to help this defense as a whole. Again, you when you break it up into units, these three units, the defensive line, linebackers, and the secondary, all have the ability to make the whole group much better. But you have to be able to take steps forward. You have to handle these new challenges and you have to play with new faces because every single level features at least one transfer that's going to be new that you have to learn how to communicate with. How do they play? What do they do in certain situations? If you know you have one call, what do they expect to do in this situation versus another? That's going to be something that's a challenge for USC on top of going into this new conference. The secondary is going to be tasked with quite a bit of challenges as well. You're going to face some talented wide receivers, and you have a number of new faces coming in. Achille Arnold is going to get things started at the safety position. That's a veteran player from Oregon State. Again, has that chip on his shoulder, ready to prove that he can play at USC and play in the Big Ten. He is someone that I really like to get everyone together. He is going to be a leader of that group, and he's going to be really fun to watch. The pair of UCLA transfers, Kamari Ramsey comes into the safety position, will join Arnold at that position, and John Humphrey, a very underrated player at 6'2", 205 pounds, could have a future in the NFL. He is someone that can have a major impact on this defense. DeCarlos Nicholson comes in from Mississippi State, so that's another player to keep an eye on at the cornerback position. So they have options. And then obviously the returner, Jalen Smith at nickel. 75 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss. Jalen Smith is someone who could have a big season, but also is going to have a lot of challenges at that spot. So again, you have lots of new faces, you have lots of options at the starting position. So we'll see what that group can do. Behind them, you'll have quite a bit of experience. And you also have Marcellus Williams, a freshman who could be part of that rotation. There's a couple of freshmen that could have big impacts. That's going to be interesting to watch if you're a USC fan. Can these freshmen step up and play right off the bat, or do they need time to acclimate to this level of play, whether that's playing at USC or in the Big Ten? At corner, you also have Jacoby Covington, a very experienced player. The production may not be as high as some of these other guys, but definitely has the ability to play. Safety feels like they're in pretty good hands. Anthony Beavers and Zion Branch are back, a combined 40 tackles between those two. So those guys know kind of what they're doing. And then we talked about Greedy Vance before. It'll be fun to see if they play him at the nickel position or if they play him at corner. Either way, you get some good depth with him on your roster. So you feel pretty good about where you're at if you're USC. It's just a matter of, again, can these guys gel? Can they put it all together? And can they handle this new challenge that is playing in the Big Ten? And then there's also the schedule. The schedule is going to provide plenty of challenges, plenty of obstacles. And in reality, you don't have a ton of time to figure things out. You need your team to be ready from day one. The first day of camp needs to be as intense as it's ever been because you don't have a ton of time to figure out how you're going to be as a team because LSU is right off the bat. And with the over under being at 7 wins, these first few games are going to dictate whether or not you're going to hit the over to the under. Playing LSU in Vegas is going to be a very tough game. It's a neutral site game, but LSU is very much ready to put a licking on USC. And that's going to be a challenge. Obviously, Utah State will be a win for USC, but then you go to Ann Arbor and face Michigan 2 weeks later. So again, that's two huge games, two massive games in the first month, I should say. That's not going to be easy. Then you get Wisconsin at home. The Badgers are going to be better than they were last year. That's going to be a tough game. Then you travel to Minnesota. Now, if Minnesota has everything put together, that could be a challenge as well. We will see. But that's a game that USC, if they have all their stuff together, they should be just fine. But also could be a trap game because next week you have Penn State. So in your first 6 games, 4 of those have very challenging opponents, and one of them could be even more difficult than what you expected. The second half of the season, I won't say it is easier, but there's also challenging games. You have to travel cross country to play at Maryland. You play Rutgers at home. Rutgers is a team that is looking to potentially shock a lot of people. And then you play a familiar face in Washington. You play Nebraska at home. We'll see what the Cornhuskers look like. So you don't exactly have games where you can take a break. You just don't. You don't have a bottom feeder team. Oh, Washington might be at the bottom of the conference, but you don't have a ton of teams that are going to be sitting near the bottom of the conference. So you have to play every single week and play your best. Then you go to UCLA. That one will be very interesting by the end of the year. And then Notre Dame. If Notre Dame is a contender for the college football playoff, if they are making a run, that is going to be tough. So this schedule definitely makes life difficult if you're a USC fan. Lincoln Riley understands the challenges that come with playing at USC, and this schedule doesn't really do them any favors. But that is what it is at this point. We'll find out a lot about this team in week one. We'll find a lot about certain positions, specifically the quarterback position in week one. And really early on is where we're going to see exactly who USC is going to be in 2024. If you're going to figure things out and you have things ready to go, if you have chemistry, if you figured out certain positions, then you're going to hit the over. A 9-3 season is definitely possible if this team gets hot. I can also see 6-6. There's a lot of challenging games, plenty of challenging obstacles in the way. So, what does this team do to get ready? What does this team do to prepare? And how do they figure out this is where we need to be? This is how we need to play. And if they figure all that out, and like I said, if Lincoln Riley has this team ready to go, then I am excited to see what USC can do. Could surprise some people now that everybody's focused on kind of the top four teams in the Big Ten. USC is one of those teams that could sneak in and surprise a lot of people in 2024.